Hi, I'm Peter Corr.
Hi, I'm Lisa Burton. Our topics of discussion will be Horizon and other ways we can closer align with the EU, TATA Steel, and the benefits of local campaigning. And today we are joined by two wonderful guests, Jas Olak and Mike Galsworthy.
Rejoin Rants.
Mike, would you please tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and give a little bit of an introduction to yourself?
Right. I'm a scientist by background, by training in psychology and genetics. But because I was doing the science of science and how science works, I got drawn into campaigning in the 2016 referendum for the value of UK-EU science collaboration. I set up Scientists for EU. And that sucked me completely away from science and all into campaigning. So I've now also set up the Bylines network of citizen journalism through my contacts with all the grassroots groups. I want to give them greater voice, but now we're expanding that in terms of students and diversity. And we've got 10 publications that basically is aimed at giving a democratic voice to everyone in this country and help building up their author profiles. But also last year, in March, I got elected as chair of European Movement UK, and that got reconfirmed this November. So I am now the chair of European Movement UK for the next 2 years. And it's going to be a really interesting time. And I think from the pro-EU perspective, that with all of our community pieces coming together and making the argument directly to the public, we're going to ride quite a wave of pro-European, pro-rejoin sentiment. And I'm really looking forward to all of that.
Excellent. And Jas, will you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
I will. Well, it's like follow that. So I'm a learning and development specialist by career, and I've always been interested in politics, but I didn't get heavily involved with campaigning for the referendum, which I think, like a lot of people, has been a bit of a regret. It's a huge shock seeing that result. But yeah, since then I've been, well, after the result was announced, I think I've been quite heavily involved in pro-EU campaigning. I'm vice chair of Leeds for Europe. I'm also part of the European movement that Mike chairs. I'm on the National Council of the European movement. And yeah, I think I'll echo what Mike said about the fact that, more and more we're seeing the damage that's been wreaked, the havoc on the nation through Brexit, amongst other things. And more and more people are waking up to that. We see that on the streets all the time. We don't have the same vibe or hostility that we used to immediately post the referendum. But I'm sure we'll talk about that as we move on to campaigning locally.
Yeah, we'll talk about that first, actually, Jas, because I'm really interested in that, and I follow Leeds for Europe quite a bit, because you do a lot of stuff out on the streets and a lot of stuff on social media. In fact, I would go as far as say you're the most active local group, as far as I can tell, on social media. What sort of gives you the drive to go out and do that? And because, like you say, I didn't start getting into this until just before 2019, really. Did I think, I need to start doing stuff instead of just moaning on the internet like everyone else? What is it that made you sort of step up and go, I need to do something?
I just knew what a monumental decision it had been. It's a once in a generation type thing, and I couldn't believe that it was a time I was going to be living through. I'd never imagined that we would shoot ourselves so terribly in the foot, as it were. And I wanted to be able to look myself in the eye when I'm pretty small. You probably can't tell, but you've all met me, so you know that I'm not very small. But when I'm a little old lady, I want to be able to look back and look myself in the mirror and say, you know what, you did your best, and you didn't just stand by and let things happen. And I've got a nephew, and I want him to have a bright future. I don't want to go to plan B where I'm encouraging him to leave the UK and find his opportunities elsewhere. He's a bright lad. He's only 10, so he hasn't known any different to what we're currently living through. But I know that there's a better future out there, and I want to be part of creating that.
Yeah, totally. It's quite upsetting for young children, isn't it? Even the older people who just wasn't old enough to vote back in 2016. I speak to quite a few of them. We've got one of them on our team as well. And it's just, they're like devastated. They feel like their future's been stolen by their elders, who they're supposed to trust and look up to in a way. So I think that's what makes me want to fight, looking at my kids.
Luckily my nephew was way too young at the time to understand what had happened, but I was upset enough as it was. But when I saw him over that weekend and I just looked at his little face and just thought of all the potential lost opportunities, the opportunities are there, but it would just made so much harder. Before we had an open door to the mainland continent, and then it was slammed shut, and that cut deep.
For me, the opportunities are still there, but only if you've got the money to nowadays, because there's so much extra costs in it. If you are a normal working class person, that's probably my biggest bugbear. You've been hurt more than anyone else, because we haven't got the money to pay all them extra costs, whether you're a DJ wanting to go and do a gig abroad, whether you're in a choir or an orchestra, or the music side of it. Erasmus has gone. Just loads and loads of stuff. If you haven't already got lots of money, you've got all of your opportunities taken away from you, haven't you?
And the sad thing was that so many people didn't even realise precisely what decision they'd taken.
Yeah.
Given the way the campaign was conducted, so many people, and I still think there's so many out there who don't truly understand what we've lost.
Well, the day after the referendum, I think the most searched thing on Google was what is leaving the EU, or something like that, wasn't it?
What is the EU?
Shouldn't you have Googled that the day before?
Yeah.
It's even worse. It was what is the EU? But yeah, I mean, we know we should always remember that no one born in this century got a vote on Brexit, and we must take a lot of faith from the fact that over 80%, I think 86 or something like that now, would like to join the EU again.
Of young people 18 to 24.
Of 18 to 24,
if you look at the Omnisus polling, recently it just hit 90%, because it fluctuates a bit, right? But I keep an eye on it. But yeah, I've actually asked from Omnisus, also called We Think Polling, because that's what they set up, the entire sort of data set of 2023, and actually looked at the age categories and broken down by male and female as well. It's overwhelming with the young people up to about age 20, up to about age 55 is when you get the female sort of crossover, and then the male crossover is about 65. But essentially, there's a big wave of the next generation coming in. And it's completely overwhelming what they think on the topic. And we just have to, as Jas was saying before, help them out, do our bit to help facilitate that wave thoroughly come in, and bringing with it all the opportunities that should have been their birthrights.
Yeah. We're laying the ground for our future generations. I think that's how we should look ourselves as campaigners, is that we are laying the ground for these younger, people to come in, and there's work done. There's a proper plan in place. The country is moving forward. And I think without the Rejoin movement, it would be very difficult to keep Brexit in the news. It would be, we would be overwhelmed with the media kind of gaslighting of the fact that it's all wonderful. So I think as campaigners, we're doing really important work. I know we all disagree about how quickly we can join, when we can join, how we go on to rejoin, but we all want to rejoin. And I think we should really take a lot of comfort from the fact that the people coming behind us are definitely going to be in that frame of mind, you know, and I think...
I wanted to ask, what do you think is driving that massive 90% of 18 to 24-year-old? Because I don't know about you guys, but I'm finding it notoriously hard to reach that age group of people. Are you finding younger people coming up to you when you're out and about on the streets, Jas?
Yeah, we do occasionally. It's a mixed bag in Leeds city centre, which is where we normally are, because depending on the time of year, you know, or what's happening, we could have an influx of people from elsewhere, but it's a huge student population. So yeah, we do get approached by young people, and overwhelmingly they're just appalled at what's happened, and you know, just grateful to see us. And I think that's one of the big things about campaigning out on the streets locally is, you know, you engage directly with your supporters as well as those who perhaps have never heard of you. And the number of times we get people who are just surprised that we're there. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes you think, where have you been? We're all over social media. Please look us up, find out more. But it's also really positive to get that engagement where people are, you know, just saying, "Oh, thank goodness, we're so glad you're doing this." And that's a real boost.
We've got that too. Whenever we've been out and about, people literally like, what? We can rejoin the EU? Like, well, yeah, of course we can. We left, didn't we? Why can't we rejoin it? Do you know what I mean? But they do act really surprised. It's like they'd not even thought about the possibility of I don't like saying going backwards, because to me rejoin is going forwards. We're going backwards now.
This is where I think the polling really helps, because it's difficult I think, well, not just Leeds for Europe, I think all groups have found it difficult to engage with young people in the sense of getting them actively involved with our movement. And that's still a struggle. And I don't have the answers to that one. I mean, it's great that we've got the Young European Movement, but out on the streets, while we get the support, you know, and let's face it, we all know what we were like when we were young. You know, you have other priorities. Politics is not top of the list necessarily. You know, if you're a student, you know, you've just started, you know, life independently, away from your family. There's also the other exciting things going on. You're discovering yourself, etc., and finding out where you fit in the world. So I can understand to some extent the lack of engagement directly and them not getting actively involved, but that doesn't mean to say that they're not following what's happening or that they don't understand. I think the polling shows that they do.
Young people are more political, I would think, than we were. They're very concerned, obviously, about climate change, you know,
Absolutely,
about equality, these sort of things. But I just think they're just so busy living life, you know. And it's the same with people with young families or struggling with work. There's a reason why the Remain movement, the campaigners, are of an older age. And that's because we have the privilege of time. We have the privilege of maybe not having to work excessively to look after your family and things like that. So I don't believe it's not that they're politically engaged. I think they are far more politically engaged than our generation were. I just think that life for them doesn't allow them a huge amount of free time as an opportunity to get involved.
I'll tell you how to get to them, though. And that is, you go to them, you don't ask them to come to you. You go to the music festivals. And this is one thing that has been happening for the last few years at Reading, is that a bunch of our crew will go down there with bollocks to Brexit stickers and pro-EU stickers, and the kids love it. They sticker themselves up with all of that. They line up, they stick bollocks to Brexit on their butts. They turn around and sort of wiggle them. They take all the pictures. They share it on Instagram. They love it. Like, whether it be posh kids or working class kids, they all love that kind of like rebellious vibe against the Brexit that is being landed on them, that's not just the government's policy, but they see that from the major parties. They know how it screws up music touring and things like that, and all the cultural stuff that they actually care about. So it goes with their lives, whether they can get, you know, jobs on holiday down in Greece or what have you over the summer. So that's what you do. You get to their events.
We've been to Leeds Fest, doing that same thing, Mike. Yeah.
So I think we need a proper program of that over the summer. You know, now that COVID is out of the way, now that all of the local groups are sort of springing up again and getting onto their kind of like action days and starting to host more events, just get them mobilized around going to lots of the festivals, not just music, all kinds of festivals. And just get out there and have fun with it, because it is now a cultural thing. And so you just need to weave it into all of that culture.
Values, I think, because we focus so much on the economy, but I think it's exactly, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's culture, it's values, and what kind of values, what kind of things are we projecting. And I think
totally about values. I mean, people voted to leave the EU thinking that maybe it'd be an economic hit, but that doesn't matter because this was right for Britain and this was us. Same thing for kind of like me. When I was looking at us staying in the EU, because I've seen the value of scientific collaboration across the EU. I knew the value of working together on climate change and basic customer protection and all of that stuff. It's about guarding the quality of our lives. And if you believe in that fundamentally, you would take an economic hit. As it happens, membership of the EU is, you know, an economic benefit as well. But we shouldn't be focusing on that. We should be focusing on what kind of life we want for ourselves and our kids in this country, and what kind of future we want for humanity as a whole. And if we believe in these fundamental European values of protecting citizens, involving citizens, protecting the natural world around us, and setting these standards about human rights, so that we've all got that basic guarantee that we're not seeing in other places of the world, then that's what it's about.
Absolutely. I mean, I started campaigning, as you guys know, I'm a British migrant living in Spain, and vice chair of Remain in Spain. And for me, I was already very well settled here. I had permanent residency. Brexit wasn't going to really affect me as such. But I just realized that the losing freedom of movement, and I don't just mean people, that's very important, and that's what I'm very passionate about, but goods, services, capital, it all comes together, was going to have such a huge detrimental effect. And I just think we took for granted how many young people used to come to Europe to work, summer holidays, bars, skiing industry, these sort of things, Erasmus, cultural exchange. You know, the touring scheme, you can go off to Australia or America, but you don't have that exchange with our European neighbours, who are almost like our cousins, you know, more culturally connected, and there's so many opportunities.
And with touring, they don't come here, which is absolutely nuts, because it was such a support for our universities. Like Oxford and Cambridge, they'll always do well. But for our middle-ranking universities, that used to get so many people coming over and getting to know them. And then for the British students in those universities that possibly don't have time or inclination to go to the continent or elsewhere, but nevertheless get French friends and Dutch friends and Portuguese friends and Polish friends who then say, yeah, come back to mine and, you know, crash out at my place when you come over. That makes all the difference to people's lives. And furthermore, on top of that, the economic arguments, like higher education is one of our best exports, and it is a soft power, and it happens on our own soil. We don't go and sell our universities in other people's countries. They actually come onto our soil, into our cities, to get our export and spend money on taxis and drinks and food and going out and clothes and everything here. It's a complete gift. And then it was Rishi Sunak who said, now actually, you know, why are we funding part of a scheme that lets people come here? And he didn't consult, and he didn't think about it. It's absolutely nuts. And it has shafted our own young people as well, because it's taken away that enrichment from them.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's almost like to our current government, Brexit wasn't enough for them in lots of ways, but specifically on what you were saying, because it is like, well, actually, let's make it even harder than on top of Brexit by saying, well, no, you can't bring your parents with you. No, you can't. No, you can't do this. No, you can't have. It's just so. It infuriates me because I know it all comes from racism, xenophobia, and all the rest of it. A lot of it does.
Even when it comes to things like youth exchanges and stuff like that, which during the negotiations, the European negotiators were offering to the UK, and they shut it down. David Frost shut it down. What a nasty old dog in the manger to say, like, no, we can't have all this cultural stuff, or the kids might have fun. And the kids, might get girlfriends and boyfriends, other European countries and have a good life. No, we're going to give them a mean, Spartan existence because we're bitter about things that we're not even aware. I don't know what he was thinking.
Oh,
but it was
don't get me started on
mean. Yeah. So, yeah.
It was always a gateway.
What was that?
Brexit was always just a gateway for them to destroy so many of our rights, and this just shows, and it, there's like envyitis there, and almost this I don't even know what word I'm looking for, really, the way they are. It's just so petty
I know,
mean-minded.
It is
so
mean.
and it's like those people. I was saying that I don't understand sort of people of Asian origin who are anti-immigrants, because I just think, hang on a minute, it's like, I'm here now, but I'm going to slam that door shut on everybody else. It's that, that the people in power, they'll always have those opportunities, because, as you said earlier, Peter, they've got the resources, the money to be able to avail of it. But to be so petty and mean-minded to prevent other people having those kind of opportunities, it just sickens me. I don't understand.
Me too. And it really is just being mean. I mean, they've gone as far as to, wash Mickey Mouse pictures off of walls so that
rub it generally.
I mean,
it was insane.
What is that all about? Who does that?
It's all down. It's all down.
Obviously.
I mean, it's a populist far right ideology, and it's isolationism. You're the best. You don't need anyone else. You shut your doors. You don't like foreigners and stuff like that. And actually, I didn't become political. I did because of Brexit in a way, but for me, it was about 2013, 2014. When I just sensed this change in language, particularly in the media, online, in rhetoric, and it was actually because we'd had some terrorist attacks, the terrorist attack that happened in Europe over those couple of years, which were absolutely dreadful. And I just could hear friends and hearing the way people were talking about then Muslims, obviously, and I almost got this panicky feeling inside going, and I just knew where it was going. I just knew that this language, once it started, was only going to get worse, and we were just literally looking at history repeating itself. So for me, I saw Brexit and I saw Trump as just an escalation of that, populism and that othering and stuff like that, which is so dangerous. And if you look across the world now, almost every conflict, even with the European countries that have these populists in charge, everything is based against the foreigner, against the immigrant, against people who don't look like you.
Yeah.
And that was my worry. And it was almost like a premonition, and it's all come true, sadly.
Yeah.
So
I don't think I ever. Sorry, Elise, didn't mean to. Just you triggered a thought, and I thought, and I don't think I ever felt different growing up, but I did as soon as I heard that result. As soon as I heard that result, it wasn't just about our cultures and values and what have we rejected here, but it was also a fear that what does that mean for people of colour, and what does it mean for EU citizens? Because in my mind, it was racism, the obvious kind of racism is directed at people of colour, and now you're going to get white Europeans facing it because, you know, they're EU citizens, and we've emboldened the far right and the racists to be able to tell you to go home. And I think, and I felt direct hostility as well coming out of that. And I don't know whether that's more because I put my head above the parapet and I do go out campaigning, but I've never had direct racism as much as I have since that vote.
No, you're not alone like that, because I've got a friend who recounted immediately after the vote that one of his friends was called the N-word, just like casually in a tube station immediately after the vote, and she said, "I've never had that like before in that way." And the interesting thing is there is something deep with the psychology here, which was, even though there was a lot against Romanians and Polish, and we all know the kind of like EU rats go home, and then the anti-Polish aggressive stuff, you did see lots of accounts of it spreading wider to anyone who wasn't judged as being pure British. So it did actually blow open the doors on a lot of hidden stuff, and it's continued forward, even though they said, and lots of people will say now who voted for Brexit, and quite rightly, let's not tarnish everyone with the same brush.
Yeah.
And they'll say now, no, it's about sovereignty and all the rest. But there was something cathartic in there, which then has carried on to a degree about the silent majority and what the silent majority thinks. There was something liberated in the psychology, in that everything had been PC before in keeping us down, and we were meant to suck it up. But now we've been able to have our say, and now we are the ones that rule, and now we are the ones in charge. So with a certain mindset, there was that liberation that wasn't just about leaving the EU. It was about removing the whole scourge of things which they had found oppressive. And that went wider than just Romanians and Polish and the European Commission.
So when a Horizon happened, for example, Mike, we can move on to Horizon. There didn't seem to be, I was expecting a bit of your typical Brexiteers to be a bit really against that, like, oh, we're getting back into the EU, like bit by bit, they're conning us back into the EU, like under our noses without us realising. But there didn't seem to be any of that. And I think it's because they didn't really want to leave all of that stuff and Erasmus and this and that and this and that. I think it was all about immigration and not being able to do stuff because of ECHR rules and international. Even if we left the ECHR, there's international laws that they wouldn't be happy with. I mean, so that's why I don't think there was any real pushback that I saw when we joined Horizon. Did you see any pushback when?
Dare I say it? I don't think some of the current bunch of politicians we've got actually understand what Horizon is. It's the level of detail that you need to be able to grasp. I know you're laughing, but I mean, come on, we've all heard them come out with utter nonsense. And you think, did you read? I mean, who was it who didn't read the Good Friday Agreement and didn't realise it was how important Dover Calais was? Hello, this is your brief. You know, just get on top of it. It's not rocket science. So, and I mean, obviously, Michael know a lot more about Horizon than I can sort of extrapolate. But I genuinely think that for some of these programs, they're not sexy enough. There's not a hook to get, you know, their populist audience riled up about it, and it's just too much hard work to get into the detail of it, because it's all about grants and funding and collaboration, and you know, that's not sexy stuff for them. They don't like collaborating. No way.
Well, actually, I'm going to disagree with you entirely.
Okay.
Which is that when we were debating this in the 2016 sort of referendum, the one thing that I found Brexiteers wouldn't have a go at is the notion of collaboration and cooperation. Just as long as they felt that we were not under the thumb of the EU and taking rules from other people and, you know, all of that, they were open to the notion of collaboration. So I went hard on collaboration and the added value from it. And I think that, you know, this was one of the reasons why when you're talking about the separation from the EU, Horizon was one of the things that was Theresa May tried to guarantee, but, you know, her kind of like no deal is better than a bad deal kind of stuff, kept threatening it and pulling that away. But no, the notion of collaborating on science was never really under threat. So the fact that we didn't get into it, I think, swung the pendulum of where we were. And the same thing with Erasmus, where we were away, far away from what even the Brexit vote was about, you know, out of the single market, out of the customs union, out of Erasmus, out of Horizon. And it has meant, by swinging it so far that way, that getting back Horizon was kind of easy. Now, there was some pushback. There was Rishi Sunak trying to say, oh, it wasn't value for money, and all. The science community was having none of it. That was a dead duck. That just looked stupid. So that got quashed. You know, David Frost, you know, trying to complain about it. And then Boris Johnson, when we got in, saying, yeah, but this doesn't mean we will join the EU. We will never rejoin the EU. He was spooked by it. But Erasmus is next. And I can tell you from polling, the Conservatives, the voters, they're for rejoining Erasmus. And similarly, Leave voters are for rejoining Erasmus. Both of those categories think that it was a mistake than think that it was the right decision. So that is also another fairly easy win. And I think is that Brexit was kind of like an explosion, a reaction to this feeling of being oppressed, of feeling limited. We've lost the empire, quality of life is going down. The media and the governments keep telling us, not our decision, it was the EU's. Voting for red ties or voting for blue ties doesn't make a difference to our life. Blow it up, blow it all up. Yeah, if this is another option that's come along, blow it all up. And then suddenly, in all these bits and pieces are scattered on the ground. It's kind of like, yeah, but that one was quite nice. Yeah, we can take that one back. So long as there's no threat, we can take that one back. And that's exactly how we're campaigning at the moment with the step-by-step to rejoin. It's a case of each piece, pick it up, look at it, examine it, show it to the public. This is quite good, isn't it? Do we all democratically agree that, you know, this is a sensible thing to agree? Okay, great. That's science collaboration. No one's disagreeing with that, right? Now, young people's exchanges and ability to like have a good time, meet other people, network, and be productive individuals. Can we all agree that this? Okay, great. Let's put that in place. And bit by bit, we can actually reassemble our place in Europe democratically, step by step, with all the education and understanding that was never properly given to us by our successive governments, nor the neglectful BBC, who've completely reneged on their mission for public education. But we can do that as a societal effort to build back bit by bit with full democratic support as we do it. So there have been some advantages in the extent of the clusterfuckery that this government has readily engaged in.
And I don't think we're disagreeing, actually, Mike. I think I'm talking about the caliber of politicians we've currently got within government, and I think some of them.
I'm not going to disagree with you on that.
I think some of them. I'm thinking to ex-Tory chairman. You know, I think that you know, I don't think that, you know, it's a fight that they want to get involved with, really, on that, because I think, like, you're right, it's not as important to them as small boats and other things that they can, you know, whip up a fury about.
That's
and I think that's where I was coming from, really. But yeah, totally agree. You know, we can step by step, bit by bit, we need to start getting back into these programs.
I was looking at EM's kind of plans for incremental changes, which was set a few years ago, like you say, part of your step-by-step policy. And actually, you must be pretty pleased because, it was part of that was to prevent erosion in standards and rights. And of course, there was a very successful campaign from European Movement UK and others against the retained EU law bill, which was a bit of a success, and to mitigate trade barriers, including Northern Ireland. And so we had the Windsor Framework, bit of a success. And we've re-entered Horizon, another bit of success, and the next stage would be to improve work-study opportunities, which of course is now coming in the shape of Erasmus campaigns. So we have inched our way forward slightly to that closer collaboration. So what are the next steps? Where do you think the successes are, and how can campaigners, like Jas, who's on the ground campaigner? I mean, I'm not so much that because I obviously live in Spain, so we're more on a political level about migrant rights and British rights in Europe. So what's the next phases? Where do you think the next successes will be?
After Erasmus.
Right. So I think clearly alignment on lots of standards is important. I mean, there's a lot that the Labour government will be empowered to do that this government just can't because of the nutter contingent within them. There's lots that a Labour government coming into power could do, from recognition of qualifications to veterinary agreements to conferences on security and tech standards, data standards, and environmental standards. I mean, a lot of what Labour can really do without having to go single market customs union free movement yet is just on warming up the friendship. Because if you want to progress with things like single market customs union rejoining, then you're going to have those relationships in place. You're going to have degrees of trust. Given that we're out of the EU framework of all the conferences and meetings, you're going to have to re-establish all of those. But a lot of politics is about knowing and trusting people, and those networks need to be warmed up. We can actually do a lot on a societal level of warming that up by having events here and there where we're exchanging political people and business people and cultural people and discussing all of these things. And whether or not Labour eventually want to go to single market customs union and all the rest, they would be nuts to neglect just good, healthy talking relations with their European counterparts. So I think the next phase is really a sort of a thawing and warming on the political level, whilst in the UK we build up the popular appetite for getting back into more programs and building new programs and making sure all parts of society are on it, and also ourselves building those links of cultural exchange, business collaboration on a pan-European level, and also, and here's the fun part, having the discussions, the conferences, the meetings about what is the British European future in terms of what we all want together. And when you're just talking about, intellectual and vision and global dynamics, we've got a good shout as anyone else to be putting ideas on the table. So there's lots of lovely future-focused, positive, fun stuff that can be had that really warms things up. And when we rediscover what it means to collaborate, to mutually co-invest and to think through things together, everything else just naturally flows from that. So that's what we really need to nurture. And bringing this onto the ground, everyone wants to be part of a vibrant, fun community that can build, that can share, that can make friends, and that can discuss, better futures. So I think a lot of what can happen on the ground is events and talks and getting in the speakers, and after the speakers you go down to the pub with them and have some drinks, and getting different societies together, not just pro-European societies, but bolt them on with different communities that have different interests or come from different cultural backgrounds, explore what they want and we want, do cross-fertilization. All of that kind of stuff is fun and lovely and educational, and part of what we need to make that whole society move, which is to get back to our rightful place in Europe. It is a whole society move, so we do need to talk to all parts of society, and we don't do that by just being a think tank trying to bludgeon the government into we want this, you're not doing this. They're not going to listen.
I don't know, Mike.
There's a lot whereby I won't go into my experiences with science here, but unless they're seeing it coming from the media and coming from their constituencies and coming in all these different cultural forms, unless politicians see that, they don't want to be the first movers. But when they see something moving, they want to get to the front of it and hold the flag.
But that frustrates me no end, because they're supposed to be leaders.
No, they're not. They're supposed to be public servants. We are the boss. The public is the boss. They have applied for a job to serve the public interest. They have put their CVs and their manifesto on the table, that it is their job in a democracy where the public have the power. Democracy, the demos has the kratos. We need to reframe this and not say Keir Starmer is our leader, we're going to petition the leader to go back. It's kind of like, no, Keir Starmer is the leading public servant charged with doing what the country wants. And the country has to be dead clear about what it wants, and he has to serve that. And if he can't serve that, the boss will look elsewhere. So we do have to turn this around in terms of how we conceive of the power dynamic in our country.
Very refreshing to see Sadiq Khan come out with one of the research and then being so vocal, because it just gives you a tiny little glimpse of what could happen if so many other politicians came out and start telling the truth and how it's hurting their economies and their constituents and stuff like that. So we had obviously the hope that gave on one side, and then the real fear, from the Brexit. Oh my God, someone is actually standing up here and saying this truth, and so fear from one side, hope from the other. But I think that it gives us a lot of hope that when Labour are in power, we're not going to have the door slammed on our faces as campaigners when we were talking about, very practical issues. That at least there will be a thawing of that. We'll just have the media to counteract, which is a great challenge, obviously, in Britain, because it is quite right leaning and very Tory supporting. So
I think this is why I think grassroots campaigning is so important, because exactly what Mike's saying, it's the public that are in charge. And I think when I think back to prior to Brexit actually being pushed through, and while we were still campaigning for a second ref, people's vote, etc., we had such a struggle in Leeds engaging our local MPs, because all our MPs are Labour, pretty much. And with the exception of Alex Sobel, I think most of them were sort of hedging their bets. And then there came a pivotal moment when they were all lining up. In fact, we had a rally out, in the city centre outside the art gallery. And we had them all. We had, Fabian Hamilton, who's small c conservative when it comes to stepping outside of the centre line, if you like. He was there. Rachel Reeves was there, all supporting, a second referendum, as well as, Alex. And then eventually we got Hilary Benn joining us on a campaign, and it was just, thank goodness we finally kind of managed to break down those doors and get them involved. And so I think it just takes time, it takes effort, it takes persistence, it takes resilience, because boy, when it's cold, it's raining, and you're out there on the street stall and people are walking past you, and you just think, why am I doing this? You're doing it for moments like that, when you finally, that's public opinion is swaying the politicians, and you're getting them on board and on side.
So quick question, since you mentioned it earlier, so just before we move on to our last topic, you did say that you've felt a real shift because you've been on the street, so going back to 2016, 17 to now. Can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by that, and some examples, and things like that?
Yeah. So I think in the early days when we first started doing street stalls, when we were still wanting to push for a second referendum, a people's vote, etc., that we had a real mixed bag of real positive support on the streets, but real hostility as well. And sometimes there was regulars who came out to berate us. We were traitors. We were, we've had a vote. Do you not believe in democracy? Those kind of charges. And more often than not, I usually got asked when I was born in this country, because of course, if I wasn't, then my opinion didn't count. Those kind of things. And we don't get that anymore.
I still see a lot of that online. I don't know
online,
you guys,
yes, but
it's kind of different, isn't it?
Trolls online, and I think you think about the people that who's are driving some of these online conversations. I think I take that with a pinch of salt, really, because on the streets, I mean, I'm not saying that people don't disagree with us, but it's far more respectful. There's none of that. I think the heat has been taken out of it, because I think maybe because to some extent they think, well, we've won, and these are just loony people now who think that they can still get back in, or leave them to it. But more often than not, it's people who are willing to actually just have a conversation, and there's a lot of regret. Actually, you hear a lot around.
I was just about to say that, yeah,
it's going to happen, and we would never have voted to leave. So you can see people slowly connecting dots as to the implications of being isolated, to use Mike's phrase from earlier about this isolationism. And, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens in America again.
Absolutely. Well, we're kind of on global security and energy, kind of. We should probably touch on one of the subjects we said we were going to touch on before we finish, and that is TATA Steel. And I thought we would kind of touch on this because, as usual, we seem to have the rhetoric from the Brexiteers that are all saying, all up in arms, it's all because of net zero, you lunatics, this is all your fault. You wanted this, look at what's happening. And so I kind of wanted to touch on that because the language from both sides is very different. And what do we think about it? I think people are angry because when the government has given them £500,000, we assumed that was to protect jobs. And now TATA Steel, they go, well, actually, yeah, we're going to take that money, we're going to add some money to it so we can use it to produce steel cheaper, and we're going to pay off all of these people. So what do we think is going to happen?
For me, this probably go down to you as well, Mike. When a lot of the time stories will break in the news, and because the media and most politicians desperately try and avoid using the B word, Brexit, for me in my little lorry, I have to really kind of dig deep and ask people and read this and read that to find out, because I'm like, I'm sure this is one of the things they said would be a good thing if we left the EU. So why is it completely the opposite way? And I wasn't able to really find anything, because it's like the entire media went in on this net zero thing and just going with the government line. And it wasn't until Kaylin did that video for Byline TV that I was like, oh my God, thank you. Someone's actually gone and actually done the bloody work to find out the reality. And it's so frustrating. And thank God for Kaylin and Byline TV being there at that time doing what they're doing.
Actually, it was a lot more system wide than that. In that, the Brexit documentary, you must have seen the first version. We actually had Port Talbot in it,
Yeah.
but that didn't make it to the final cut, which is something that Galen and I are so annoyed about. But we won't go into reasons why. But the whole notion that the EU had been providing all of the support structure around that for so long, partly because of a regional development fund, you know, as an impoverished area, and you're keeping fundamental infrastructure and fundamental industries going across the EU. Yes, it is more protectionist, but sometimes it's a good idea to protect your fundamental food and production of resources and so forth. So because we'd had that sort of background in those conversations, as soon as the TATA announcements came through, Caelan just jumped on a train heading off to Port Talbot by himself with his equipment. And he gave me a call on the train saying, I'm going off to Port Talbot. Have you seen the news? I need someone to help me because I can't do the camera work and do the interviewing. And do you know any people out there? So I called up the Wales for Europe lot, well, Jackie, and she was like, yeah, right, Mike, what do you want? And I said, well, Caelan's coming away. Can you help him out? She said, I'll call him in 20 minutes. So then Jackie helped sort out connections with lots of other people that got him the interview with Carwyn Jones, but also got one of the locals, Charles Smith, actually helping out Caelan over those 2 days, carry equipment round and driving him around to different places.
Amazing.
And then when he told me that he got that interview, I said, right, can we put this out through Bylines Cymru as well? And he said, so Rachel at Bylines Cymru got the first draft of the video and got the article ready for when it was released. And then when it was released, Caelan and I were sending it around all the big hitters to get it out there, get it out there, get it out there. And as soon as it got out there, people were using it as rebuttals on the net zero stuff as well. And the fundamental point is here that if you look at the UK compared to other European countries or the G7 countries, most countries think that it is worthwhile investing in the fundamental capacity to make steel, not to repurpose scrap metal with you know, arc welding, but to actually make steel from the raw materials. And that is something that our governments have been really bad at protecting. And it was one of the reasons that real Brexiteers wanted to leave the EU, is because they thought that the EU was too protectionist on its fundamental steel making and car making and food production. So for all the nationalist fervour that they give out, they're actually quite against the nation state being independent, which is really weird, because I'm all for international collaboration, but I believe that at least on the nation state level, regional level, you should have the capacity for self-sustaining on food, on energy, and from other things. But anyway, they told these steelworkers one thing, which is, you know, the EU is, you know, bad for you. But on the other front, they're quite willing to let it all drop through. Whereas the EU had been actually the one carrying the can on investment into all of these structures, including trade, that made steel giants like Tata think, okay, here's a safe base to invest in. But yeah, there's so much from the modern mainstream media that is not inquisitive about how things work, that does not engage in the inquiry and the public education, and rather just wants to cover a story and move on. So we'll take its lines from the government and then say we're done. And that is something that you know, at Byline TV, at Byline Times, and the Bylines Network, we are all fundamentally opposed to, because that is lazy and that does not fundamentally serve the public well. So I'm very glad that we went and did that. There'll be more coming from it, but I'm glad that we got in there early, and Caelan is an absolute champion, because he works harder than almost everyone else I know. When he knows something's on, he just goes. And on a wing and a prayer, And then there have been lots of times where we as a wider community have helped fit around that because we believe in
shout out to the grassroots there.
He knows how to do it.
Yeah,
he really does.
Because Wales for Europe, I mean, and this is what's so great about the grassroots groups again, because it gives our movement an agility to be so proactive so quickly that we wouldn't have if we were, just based out of London or only focused on Westminster. You wouldn't be able to just pick up the phone to Jackie in Wales for Europe, or Leeds or Birmingham or wherever it happens to be. So, yeah.
What pisses me off about it, what pisses me off, which is always the thing about Brexiters actually, is the hypocrisy of it. So they're like, I had a little couple back with Andy Wigmore on Twitter yesterday about this. Lovely. I'm some sort of lefty crying baby, lunatic who got what they wanted of net zero sort of thing. But what pisses me off is they're saying, oh, they're so quick to point the finger. This is net zero lunacy. This is net zero lunacy. But the fact is, TATA are losing 1.5 million a day, and at least this production, they need to move to a greener so they can reduce the cost of producing the steel. So they're almost saying that going greener, using less carbon fossil fuel is going to make it cheaper. But where are they? Then where are they when talking about the fishing industry or farming? Or the 2/3 of SMEs who are struggling to export to the EU. They don't stand up for those industries who are really struggling because of their Brexit, what they pushed on the country. But as soon as there's an opportunity to gaslight the nation over something as significant as net zero, they're there. And what I put across yesterday was that if you are against net zero, you are basically saying you want Britain held back, because the green revolution is huge. It's going to be huge. It's like the Industrial Revolution. Who gets there first? Has the best technologies? It's going to create a whole new type of industry that will deliver, high-paying jobs, ongoing jobs. But these guys, they want Britain to sit back, do nothing, lose our place on the global stage for new technologies, disadvantage the country, put us at a higher security risk, and make us deal with dictators across the world instead. So by arguing against net zero, to me, they're just being completely unpatriotic. They're not thinking about the future of Britain. And,
they are completely unpatriotic. It's why it makes me so cross that they claim to be the patriots. All of the people they use, you all just mentioned, whether it's steel workers, fishermen, farmers, working class people, everybody they use to say this is why you need Brexit. I don't believe for a minute they honestly believed they were going to win and we were going to leave the EU. So it's like as soon as we did leave, you could see it on Go's and Boris's face, literally, when the result come in, they both looked like there was absolutely shit in bricks, like, oh my god, what have we done?
And you come full circle with that. You're coming full circle back to how this situation in Port Talbot's come about, because no one can trust this government to have a coherent plan on anything. So businesses do not operate in a vacuum. Industries do not operate in a vacuum. They need certainty. And investment comes with certainty. There is no certainty with this government. Who knows what they're going to want to do tomorrow, and pushing the envelope with Brexit all the time. So, where will that go? And as Mike alluded to earlier, in the EU, they're still shoring up that industry, because they understand the importance of, being able to have these kind of resources made domestically, so that you're not reliant on foreign powers. The short-sightedness of Brexiters, unfortunately, means that Port Talbot are suffering now.
I'll tell you a funny story on steel and the EU, actually, because when I was in Sheffield, I remember getting into a cab and, chatting about those issues, and the cabbie telling me, oh, yeah, but the EU completely destroyed our steel industry, didn't it? I thought, oh, this. So I told him this story, which had been told to me by someone who actually was lobbying for UK steel for a long time. She was an MEP as well. And that is that back in the early 2000s, the president of the US at the time, George W. Bush, was trying to get the support of the US steel industry. So he decided to put tariffs on steel from Europe in order to protect the US steel industry. Now, this hit European steel, but it particularly hit UK steel because, you know, we hadn't been putting a lot of support into it. And so Tony Blair, who had good relations with George W. Bush, sort of begged for those steel tariffs to be removed because it was hurting us, particularly our high-grade steel, which was quite rare and sought after. But the price differences just were really hurting us. Wouldn't listen to Tony Blair, wouldn't listen to the UK, despite the begging. But we were part of the EU at the time. So we went to the EU and said, you know, we really need help here. And then the EU threatened the US and said, dear George W. Bush, if you persist with these steel tariffs, we are going to put tariffs on a whole range of politically sensitive products that you send to us at the moment, including, I think it was Harley Davidson motorcycle parts, and, you know, picked from all the different states, but most importantly, Florida oranges, because George W. Bush's brother, Jeb Bush, was the governor of Florida at the time, and his position was a bit ropey. And if the orange industry went down or got hurt in Florida, that could tip it. Do you know what happened? George W. Bush dropped the steel tariffs. So the EU, through the size of its market, just battered away the US from victimizing our steel industries for their own internal politics. So the EU actually rode to the rescue of UK steel. But you won't hear the ultranationalist Brexiteers talk about that, will you? But that's real politics. That's power in the world of big markets. And that's one of the reasons why you build something like a single market with a customs union around it, so that you've got a sustainable system in there and you're protecting core industries. But that, for me, is a very, very illustrative story of how the EU has actually forged something that can stand up to the US market and to the Chinese market and to the other markets of the world. And that is something that that outside the EU were a lot more vulnerable to.
And I mean, was that story like made a big thing of in the media at all?
No.
There you go.
I remember. I do vaguely remember the news channels talking about the tariff situation, but obviously the inside story. The inside story was different. But, I mean, I remember that the EU
saying, "Oh, thank the EU, we love the EU. This is one of the benefits of the single market." Da 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 da.
And that's the problem. I think that's what needs to be done, isn't it?
I think we're going to find that more and more and more as we go forward, is that there is power in numbers. The EU is a powerful bloc that, you know, and if Britain wants to be secure, safe, it needs to be part of the EU so we can stand against China, Russia, you know, and possibly even America, God forbid. So I think that we will leave it there. That's a good ending, I think, just to say we're definitely better off with the EU. And I would like to really thank you guys for joining us tonight. It's been lovely chatting and really informative. And keep up the great work campaigning, Jas, on the street, and maybe we'll catch up in London again sometime soon, I hope. And thank you, Mike. That was thanks for taking the time out to speak with us today. It's been
thank you for having me.
Guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Keep going.
We're not going to stop. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, everyone. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, like, comment and share. If you're listening on the podcast, you can watch the video too on YouTube. Just search for Rejoin Rants. We'll see you next time.
Rejoin.